The Glass Room, written and narrated by Benjamin Job. Thomas didn't notice the change at first. It came in whispers, a short temper at the checkout line, grinding teeth during his commute, sleeping pills that stopped working. The world seemed to be turning up its volume one notch at a time, until every headline screamed and every conversation felt like warfare. His therapist called it adjustment disorder. But what was there to adjust to? The endless parade of manufactured crises, the way social media turned neighbors into enemies, the constant feeling that someone was profiting from his misery. Everything's more efficient now, his coworkers would say, their eyes fixed on their phones. But Thomas saw only decay, communities fracturing, attention spans shrinking, humanity reducing itself to metrics and engagement scores. Nature itself seemed to be retreating, leaving behind concrete deserts and artificial light. He started keeping a journal, documenting the patterns. Food that didn't taste real anymore, children who didn't play outside, friends who spoke in rehearsed sound bites. Each entry became a brick in a wall of evidence that something fundamental had broken in the world. The breaking point came during the corporate wellness seminar. As the speaker droned about optimizing human capital and leveraging mindfulness for productivity, Thomas felt something snap. The sheer artificiality of it all, using ancient wisdom as a band-aid for modern exploitation, crystallized everything he'd been feeling. That night, in a sterile apartment overlooking a city that never truly got dark, Thomas wrote his final observation. We've engineered a world that no human being was meant to live in. The pills were bitter, but the peace that followed was sweet. Then his eyes opened. The room was white, perfectly, impossibly white. No shadows, no edges, just an endless clinical expanse. A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. Subject 2347 has completed simulation track B, preparing for cognitive assessment. Figures in featureless hazmat suits appeared, their movements too precise to be natural. They spoke in clinical terms about impressive immersion metrics and sustained psychological deterioration. What is this? Thomas tried to ask, but his mouth wouldn't move properly. His memories began to split and double. Which life was real? Which pain was authentic? Subject shows optimal stress responses to manufactured societal collapse narrative, one figure noted, recommending advancing to Phase 3. Through the chemical haze, Thomas realized he was witnessing something horrific. They weren't just studying depression or social breakdown. They were perfecting it. Each subject was a test case in a grand experiment. How far could you push a human mind before it broke? How much meaning could you strip away before someone lost the will to continue? The simulated world he'd died in wasn't a prediction or a warning. It was a prototype. A laboratory for refining human suffering, built by people who saw consciousness as something to be optimized and exploited. Days or weeks or years passed in that white room. Sometimes they put him back in simulations, worlds where technology turned predatory, where genuine human connection became extinct, where every aspect of life was monetized and measured. Other times they left him in the endless white until he longed for the artificial world he tried to escape. Thomas learned that the true horror wasn't in the obvious distortions, the manufactured crises, the engineered social divisions, the synthetic pleasures. It was in the subtle theft of purpose, the gradual erosion of everything that made life worth living. In lucid moments, he wondered if this too was just another layer of the simulation. Perhaps he was still in his apartment, his mind spinning elaborate fantasies as the pills took effect. Or maybe he'd never left the original simulation. Maybe there was no real Thomas at all. But in the end, it didn't matter. Whether he was a test subject, a digital consciousness, or a dying man's final dream, he had glimpsed something profound. A life without authentic purpose was no life at all. And in that understanding, paradoxically, he had found a fragment of meaning, even if that meaning was simply to bear witness to its own absence. The white room remains, and Thomas remains with it, both observer and observed in this experiment without end. Sometimes, in the sterile silence, he thinks he can hear other subjects screaming. Maybe it's laughter. In this place engineered for the study of human darkness, perhaps they're the same thing. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing to VIP Access for 2 exclusive stories each week. If a subscription isn't in your budget, sharing helps just as much. Spread the word on social media, share links, and tell friends and family. Your support and word of mouth make it possible for me to keep creating high-quality content. Thank you for listening to this Idea Forge production.